Welcome, everybody. I'm Pastor Jamie here at Cornerstone Church. This is Ask, and this is where you ask questions, and we try to answer. Usually it's me, but sometimes we have guests on. Last week we had Roy Baldwin down from an Adnock, and he stayed over, watched Star Wars movies for an entire week. That's and right. Here he is back, wearing the same clothes. Me too. All right. And well, we had Roy down because we did a promo video. Hopefully you've seen by now. If not, will you please watch it? What is wrong with you? That wasn't too harsh, was it?
No, not
okay,
too, not too bad.
Good. I got to preach sometimes, right? So, yeah. And so we watched that because we have a great conference, May the 4th, one day, 4 speakers. You should know by now, but if not, if you have a family and it's not perfect, you should come.
Absolutely.
Right?
We'll be there.
All right. Yeah, we will be too. Okay, so we asked and answered a couple of questions last week, Roy, about carving out space, getting my child to read their Bible, how do we do devotion? So we answered that. This is another one, because I grabbed these two out of my pile about specifically family, and so one more on a child and one on marriage that I want to try to answer on this episode. This one, how much church should I let my teen child miss for work or activities? Since I'm a pastor, we all know my answer.
Yeah. But again, it's like what we talked about this last week is what's your priorities? Mm-hmm. I think for a teen child who has work and activities, where's church in that? And I love what you talked about. How often do you see a parent going up to a baseball coach and saying, my kid's not getting enough time in God's Word? I mean, again, part of that is, this understanding, right, from a church perspective is there are two kingdoms. You cannot serve two masters. And so I think you have to look at raising children from that perspective. Is what really is life-giving to them and what isn't. And obviously, we all have to have jobs and we have to get the right education, and God has called us to do certain things, but I don't think God ever asks us to do things that come at the expense of our relationship with Him. And so I think that's the bigger question that needs to be asked is, how are these things playing out in my child's faith? How's that lived out in their lives? Are they, in His Word? Are they doing devotions together? Is it every weekend? Can they rework their schedule a little bit? Is that a conversation they could have with their boss or, with their coach to say, hey, I need to at least go to church at least once a month or twice a month. And again, that's something I think a parent and child need to
has to talk about.
Have to talk about. And
so what if they were to say, because in some regards, there's this, even amongst the Christian community, there's a devaluing of church, right? It's like, well, hey, they go to youth group, or we do family devotions. We're living the Christian life, which is great because just church isn't going to be enough. But is there a certain point where gathering with the Christian community should be a priority, and if so, how much?
Well, right, because I think honestly, and this is our relationship with Christ, I think oftentimes is we always leave Christ as our last option.
Right.
We've exhausted all of our thinking, our thoughts, we've asked all the people for wisdom, and typically it's Christ or, we obviously add the church to that. Is this a last option? And it should never be the last option. It should always be the first option.
I talked to a lot of pastors, and the research is done, and I think it bears itself out. I think I really like where our church lands here. I think a lot of our families do prioritize, but at the same time, they feel the strain because we live in a culture now where Sunday is not sacred. And so stores are open, restaurants are open. I mean, everything's open. Now, games and activities, leagues are being played, club sports, league sports, they're on Sundays, and sometimes more so than Saturdays, right? Because Sunday, who's doing anything Sunday? They don't even think. Well, people might actually want to go and gather and worship. And so we're all feeling the strain and have to make decisions that I know as a kid, I played every sport imaginable, and my parents, they cared about church, but it wasn't as much as they probably should. It never was a problem, right? Because it's once in a while to maybe an all-star travel team or something. Other than that, which I of course made all of those, but now the strain is there, and so they're feeling it, and they have to say, what is our priority? But maybe the better question is, what is my child when they're grown up? What is this going to model for them? What lasting impact? That's a hard question sometimes to answer. Yes. Because you don't want to make them hate church and think it's church that robbed them of being able to fill in the blank. I understand that, but if they get that image in their mind that my parents don't really think it's that important. They say it is, but they let me work. They let me never, hardly ever go to church. That's going to have a lasting impact.
No, it will. And again, so this comes back to, our mission. And I think for me, I'll give a good example is my son had an opportunity to go to kind of a prestigious high school, and the marching band was like #1 in the state. And we had some very difficult decisions of, was that more important, because we knew that would pull him from church.
Yeah, Sunday's big band day. Big band competition.
And so for us, we made a decision with our son to say what's most important, and we all landed as Christ is most important in our relationship, in our family, in our relationship, and who we value. And so he ended up going doing school a little differently. He became super involved in the church, and now he's a sophomore at Cedarville. And again, these things I believe set things up well later on for the decisions that he makes. And so to your point is at a young age, we say, well, church is optional, which again, I don't think church is optional, then what message are we sending long term?
Right.
And again,
sets them up for that tone of their life. Like you said with your son, it wasn't the only thing, but it was a big thing because you love the Lord and your family. We've talked about all the other things you try to do with your family, but if at the same time you're saying, don't worry about being part of church and being part of a church community, be part of the band community. And there's nothing wrong with the band community.
Nothing wrong with the band community.
There's nothing wrong with being on the soccer team or playing that sport or working that job. But especially teenagers, like, if it comes down to it and they have to miss every Sunday for a job, like,
well, they can't use that as, they can't come to heaven one day where every knee will bow and say, hey, like my band made it to state competition and we were #1 in the state. That doesn't get me entry.
God's not impressed with that.
He's not impressed with that. And so so that's the bigger question that has to get asked. And then it's a family being very prayerful about their time, how they spend their time, the things that they're pursuing. Again, to your point, those things in and of themselves they're not bad things.
No.
But if it comes between my relationship with the Lord, it can be.
Yeah.
And so it's just being mindful of those kinds of things for a parent.
They're saying, the studies now are that on average, a family goes to church twice a month. And it used to be, we're not talking about the peripheral families. You're still trying to seek out the Lord because of all of these things. And, we have to make what in 20 years is going to matter more to our kid. And that's a hard decision to make because we want them to enjoy, be successful, thrive. And sometimes we're going to be honest, we like to live vicariously through them. When my son does well on the basketball team, I'm like, because that's exciting to me. Or if my daughter does great in the play that she's in, I'm excited for her and I want her to do that. And so it's hard pull sometimes, but God has to come first.
He does.
Just does. Let's do one more. This one's more to do with marriage. I'm sure Steve's watching the clock. Just stop. Calm down, Steve. I feel like my marriage is not in a bad place. This is the questioner, of course, not me. Heather'd be like, really? No.
Really?
But it feels like it could be a lot better. We are so busy with life, it feels like we are not connecting the way we used to. Do you have advice for what we could do? And that sounds like, I don't know about yours, but my marriage has been there before. The busyness of kids, life, and I try to, whenever I do premarital counseling, I'm always like, it's like I gotta help them see beyond that year of, and it's like, I know you think everything's roses, but you're gonna have to work at this and equipping them for that. And because the truth is that just the honeymoon period ends, kids come, usually, not always, but usually, things happen, stresses of work, and boom, there you are. And you don't mean to get there, but you are.
Yeah. No, actually, one of the things that's really cool, what I love about the question is, one, they recognize it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's why when I look at the dashboard of my car, I'm glad there are warning lights that came up to let me know. It's like, I need to take this in to get serviced. So whoever sent the question is, first of all, I applaud you in the sense that you're recognizing that something seems a little off. And what do we usually do when there's something a little bit off? We usually take it into the dealer or shop, the guy that we trust, and hey, can you kind of take a look at it? And so my encouragement would be the same thing. I think there's so many amazing resources out there anymore, Jamie, where there are workbooks. There's online courses. You can, sit together and watch a YouTube video together.
We also have, our church has right now media where we've invested in tons of online-based studies on everything, but a ton. One of the biggest categories, as you can imagine, is marriage.
Yeah, absolutely.
That you can just flip on as long as, and you can do it yourself. If obviously they're not a part of our church, YouTube, or buying some curriculum, asking your pastor or asking someone you trust, and just going through that together will just spark the discussion and bring some closeness.
Yeah, actually, so there's a book, and I'm going to screw up the title of it, but there's a book that Karen and I, so when we were house parents at a school, we did it for 9 years. We would oftentimes when we were alone or go out to lunch or dinner, we could not talk to each other about anything but about our work. And so we had a really difficult time just doing that. So we bought a book, had over 500 questions, from what's your favorite color to your favorite kid's memory to a lot more. What do you think about our finances, which are always a little dangerous because, we talk about finances.
If it is date night, maybe you
want to stay away from stay away from those questions. But I do think, so there are some really good resources out there that can just help stimulate conversation. It is, how do you rediscover that love? How do you woo each other, date each other again? I mean, just really schedule a night where you have someone watch the kids.
To piggyback on the question, Heather and I came to Monadnock for a year ago, December, and to the marriage retreat, couples retreat. And that was one of the things that you guys had set up, was questions in the trail. And that was probably the best thing we did, and the speakers were great, and the time was great, and the worship was great. But we just walked that trail, and I took pictures because Heather especially was not going to be able to answer those between each sign.
Sure.
I love you, Heather, but come on. So I took pictures, so we had to answer some afterwards as well. And I just had the picture on my phone, and they were just very questions. Some of them were like that, favorite color type thing, but some of them were a little more in depth. And some things came out that weren't easy to deal with. Like, I didn't realize she was feeling that way. But it gave her a space to say that, and the same for me. And we maybe didn't perfectly heal all those things, but we talked about them, and some of them are in a better place. And so that you don't have to go to a retreat to do that.
Don't.
You can do it anytime.
You don't.
You really can. But I think what you got to was to just first and foremost carve out some space together.
You do. You got to create space.
You got to have a date night. Maybe it's not every week, but at least once a month, where it's just you and her, or her and him, depending on who's watching this, and get a babysitter. Don't bring the kids on that, right? And have a time where it's just the two of you. And also have some. If you do have kids, sometimes that creates some stress. Do some things together, but don't divide and conquer. Be together even in that. You're not going to be able to have the same conversations with your kids there. We get that. But spend that time together. Make sure you're not just talking to the kids, but you're talking to each other and the kids. The kids see that, and you grow closer because of those scenarios.
Well, absolutely. And again, it's really being present in those moments. I think when I look at, the stress on families today, it's not the way it used to be. Typically you have both parents holding down jobs. So when you come home after long days together, both of it is, how do we unwind? How do we do that? I think for a couple, they really need to be able to make sure they have something left over to be able to give that space and time to their spouse to really engage with them on a heart level. And that's, I'm guilty of this, is I need to put my phone down. And so maybe the dining table it's a no cell zone, or they're, after bedtime, after watching a movie, whatever those practices are as a couple, it maybe just is what small tweaks do we need to make so we can just be a little bit more present for each other. The other thing one of the things I loved is, and again, I wish my wife and I did it more regularly, but we learned this at a family retreat, is we would grab each other's hands, and then we would just pray for each other before our day would start. And we wouldn't pray about the kids. I would pray for her, and she would pray for me. Can I tell you, my day goes a whole lot better when my wife and I just have that time together where it's just us. And
praying together. I totally agree. Before the day, if at all possible, and if not, or even both, maybe a little bit more elaborate time. Even if it's not every day, but finding time to pray together.
It's huge.
Finding time to do a devotional together. Even if you have kids, maybe it's with the whole family. But again, participate, not just you and the kids, but together. together, right? Because now there's a closeness, there's a spiritual intimacy, not just, physical intimacy or emotional intimacy. And God will, He'll really bless that.
Well, absolutely. And I think when you invite Christ into that space, I mean, you're empowering the Spirit to do its work, to constantly draw us together. So the Holy Spirit's role with our relationship with Christ is to constantly, usher us back. And so you see this beautiful thing within the marriage relationship as well.
So I think that's where you got to start, right? It's got to be on that daily, ongoing basis. But I think it's also really good to go away together.
Yep.
The budget's the budget, so some of you can easily go to Hawaii. That ain't me, right? But maybe it's, I'm like, Heather and I try to go, we'll go up to Agunquit. That's where we usually go for 2 or 3 nights, and we have a couple of places we go.
That's great.
We go out to dinner, whatever. Maybe you can do that. Maybe it's one night and you just, have some points or a hotel that you can get and just get away. Or maybe it's just a day together and it's not overnight. But do that. And then also, if you can go to a couples or a marriage retreat at Monadnock or, a place like that where you can go and just, it's not even always about the speaker. It's just about being there, and you're like ready. You're both focused on, we need our marriage to be better.
We have a couple that comes every year. They've been coming 17 years, and this is their tune-up. They see their couples retreat as just like our car. We come in and we learn, oh wow, this is how we need to be communicating, or this is how we need to do those things. But they're just super intentional, and so that's what we love about our retreats, is just kind of creating space for them.
What's cool too is you can stay right on Monadnock, but you can also you guys have deals with at least one, maybe a couple of different bed and breakfast.
We do.
That's what Heather and I did. So especially if you're budget conscious, right? Like you can't go, but obviously this is not going to cost you a ton of money.
Absolutely.
So definitely do that. But lastly, what I'd like to say, because we're running out of time, but lastly, what I'd like to say is that if you feel like you need a person, go to your pastor or to a counselor in your church. Yep. Obviously, a lot of our people watching this are our church. Come to see me or go see Pastor Bob or Vicky or somebody, and we can sit down. And the best people are the people who are just here. Not like the people usually come to me are desperate, right? But then it's like, I got to get them to want it, right? But if they come to me when they're still feeling okay about things, we can do a lot of things to help them.
Yeah, my wife and I, 2 years in our marriage, ended up going to a pastor and counseled us for about 6 to 8 months before we could, having that outside person from a godly perspective, being able to really guide us through some really pain points in our marriage, really saved our marriage. And so I can't.
Don't be embarrassed to do that.
No, absolutely.
Every time I'm counseling a couple, I'm always like, man, I kind of wish someone would do that for Heather and I, because it's great mediation.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, thanks for being on, Roy.
Loved it.
2 weeks in a row.
Loved it.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Sign up for the conference May 4th. Go see them out at Monadnock. We'll see you in church here at Cornerstone. Remember, cornerstonebv.org. Submit your questions, and we will see you soon. God bless.